All right, welcome to Touchdown Talks. I'm Spencer Taylor. This is going to be my instant reaction to Super Bowl 60 between the New England Patriots and the Seattle Seahawks in Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara, California. Super Bowl 60, 2026 Super Bowl, and the finale to the 2025 NFL season and playoffs. Bittersweet, mostly bitter to have to say that last part. Football is officially over for the 2025 year of football. That year has come to an end now. We are fully in the football offseason now, but especially for Seahawks fans, you got plenty of time now to enjoy it, soak it up, enjoy it. It was a good game. Maybe not the most entertaining game, I know, for most viewers. Not the most entertaining as far as high scoring or anything like that. It was a very low scoring affair for most of the game. Scoring massively ramped up in the fourth quarter, which didn't come as too much of a surprise to me. But, for the most part, not a ton, pretty lopsided matchup. It felt like throughout, so maybe not necessarily the Super Bowl that everybody would have wanted. But, the saddest part about it, at least in my opinion, is that, we now begin the full countdown to a new season of football, a new season of NFL football specifically. So got quite a few months until then. But in the meantime, going into my thoughts on this game, though, as I mentioned already, this was a obviously pretty lopsided affair. It was a game where, honestly, the game went quite about how I had predicted. If you watched my prediction videos, both the shorts and the full video, where I went through some of my thoughts and as well as kind of outlined some of my bets, you'll see that the script for this game pretty well fit a lot of the things I talked about. Going through the game here, fourth quarter, all we had was a first drive field goal from the Seahawks. After that, the teams exchanged punts, 8-play drive and a punt for the Patriots, a 3-and-out for the Seahawks, one more punt each for each team in the first quarter. Then going into the second quarter, you had a punt from the Patriots, another field goal by Seattle, and then you had another 3-and-out for the Patriots, another punt by each team after that as well. So 3 punts in a row there, 4 total in the second quarter. By that point, that was 8 punts so far just in the first half. We also then had a field goal towards the end of the first half, and then the Patriots getting the ball with 11 seconds left to go in the half ended up just electing to kneel and just go into halftime. Then going into the third quarter, it was much the same story. You had 3 3-and-outs for the Patriots with punts at the end, and then a field goal for Seattle, as well as a couple punts for them as well, and 3-and-outs there. So it was a very strong defensive matchup throughout. Good amount of sacks, not a ton of turnovers, but there were a couple, and mainly from Drake Maye. Takeaways for the Seattle Seahawks defense, which of course ended up being the difference maker in large part with those turnovers. One of the first of those coming in the last drive of the third quarter for the Patriots, that being a strip sack fumble for Drake Maye and the Patriots that went the way of the Seahawks. Then going into the fourth quarter, they did capitalize off of that fumble, got a touchdown. Then, to New England's credit, they finally got on the board, responded with a quick 3-play, 65-yard drive for a touchdown. But at that point, it was already, things were already pretty late at that point. The score was 19-7 by then, with, very little left in the game to go. So pretty rough from there. Then you had Patriots defense came out, did hold the Seahawks to a 4-and-out, but then on offense, the Patriots came back out, have an interception by Drake Maye, Seattle capitalizes on that one with a field goal. Then on the next New England drive, they have another interception by Drake Maye, and then that ends in not only just an interception, that goes as a pick six for the Seahawks, putting the score up to 29-7, basically salting away the game. The Patriots did then follow that up with a drive down to the end zone, scoring a touchdown, going to 29-13. But then it was Seattle got the ball, went 3 and out, but really was just trying to run out the clock. You give the ball back to the Patriots with 1:49 left on the clock. Patriots 6 plays, 65 yards, but not enough to get down to the end zone or do anything. And so final score ends up being 29-13. So it ended up being that as far as the over-under, the spread, of course, my bets before the game had been, I had predicted the Seahawks to win by a score of 23-20. I had also mentioned that I also like the number of 23-17 as a possibility, but 23-20 was the score I went for in favor of the Seahawks, meaning that I was taking the Seahawks to win, but I was taking the Patriots to cover that 4.5 spread. And then for the over-under, I was taking the under there. I ended up being correct on the under. The over-under was at 45.5, so we ended with a final score of 42, so just under that. So the under, I hit that there. Of course, I hit the winner with the Seahawks, and then with the spread 4.5, I was wrong there. Thankfully, as far as actual bets I placed, not a whole ton there on the Patriots covering the spread. As a matter of fact, even though that was my total score prediction, I didn't really bet the actual spread line at all. And that's why I had mentioned I took, as far as the spread goes, I had actually taken an alternate spread of minus 2.5 for the Seahawks, because again, I thought they were going to win by at least 3. So I was confident in that. Now, of course, I could have taken that 4.5, and there were some sharp bettors out there that I do watch pretty consistently that had actually been advising, go ahead and take a minus 6.5, which, of course, now in hindsight, I wish I had followed that advice, but I wasn't quite that confident in the Seahawks' ability to blow out the Patriots. But I certainly did believe that the Seahawks were going to win this, and that there was a possibility it was going to be close to a touchdown. But again, I played a little bit more safe there with the spread, which is fine. I ended up being right on those bets, just didn't get the greatest return out of it. But for the rest of the game, as far as stats wise, players wise, really both quarterbacks, not the greatest games from either. For Sam Darnold, an okay game, pretty safe, pretty clean, but not the greatest game though. 19 out of 38 passing, that's a lot of passing, but no interceptions. Had a couple plays that got a little scary looking, but for the Seahawks, things worked out in their favor, and for the most part, Sam Darnold certainly didn't have any moments where it looked like he was seeing ghosts or anything. Sam Darnold, I've talked about it. I talked about it coming into this game a little bit throughout this playoffs. Sam Darnold has proven the doubters, including me at times, proven us wrong. Sam Darnold is a redemption story in American sports now. Coming all the way from being the 3rd overall pick for the Jets, having a horrible stint there with the Jets, which obviously not easy or not hard to understand that that's kind of just a Jets thing, unfortunately. Pretty much anybody that's involved with the Jets, doesn't matter if it's quarterback, other positions on the field, coaches, whatever it is, most people in the NFL go to the Jets, however well they do there, or not so well, they go to the next spot, and eventually they end up looking a lot better. So, very dysfunctional team in the Jets. But yeah, so for Darnold and for his story, though, gets drafted in 2018, I believe it was, 3rd overall pick by the Jets, pretty quickly looks like a bust, has a couple games that were famous for, him literally saying, I was seeing ghosts out there, and that's why that follows him. has been following him since. So, he flames out with the Jets, bounces around to a couple places, including the Panthers, the 49ers, and then finally here, the Vikings last year, of course, has the great season with the Vikings last year, but ends up, kind of going pumpkin mode, seeing ghosts a little bit towards the end there last year, and then gets picked up by the Seahawks. And then this year, again, not the perfect year, not, he wasn't necessarily in the running for MVP or anything, but played a good season, certainly above average for the year. And really outside of a handful of games against some really good defenses and against rival opponents, Sam Darnold's played pretty well this year. But in this game, again, not the greatest completion percentage, pretty close to 50% for Darnold there. But I think as we're starting to see in the NFL, completion percentage isn't always everything. If you're able to play clean with the ball, which Darnold was, no interceptions, had a touchdown, 202 yards through the air, he played clean enough, didn't do anything to lose them the game, which, especially with a defense, with a strong defensive team, with a defensive head coach, for a lot of defensive head coaches, that's all they're asking for out of their quarterback is just don't lose us the game. Make some good throws for us when we need them, but just for the most part, protect the ball. Don't lose the game for us, and we'll be fine. And Sam Darnold did that. No pumpkin mode this playoffs. Today against a pretty good New England defense that was playing tough. Sam Darnold played pretty well. However, he did not win the MVP. The MVP for the Super Bowl 60 MVP does go to Kenneth Walker III for the Seahawks. He carried the ball 27 times for 135 yards. No touchdowns. Longest run ended up being 30 yards. But yeah, so he was a dominant force. Averaged 5 yards a carry. So pretty tough to win when your opponent has a running back that's doing that on 27 carries. So Kenneth Walker played really well. Earned that MVP. It's not super common that we get a non-quarterback MVP. And certainly when it's not a quarterback, it's often still a receiver or running back. But so that's what it ended up being. Running back got the MVP this year, that being Kenneth Walker for the Seahawks, and deservedly so. For the Seahawks, the Patriots obviously definitely did focus on shutting down Jackson Smith and Jigba, and it worked pretty well. He did have 4 receptions for 27 yards, and to be fair to Jackson Smith and Jigba, he was out for about a quarter of the game, being examined for a concussion. Was able to come back in towards the end of the game and for the fourth quarter, but the Patriots, to their credit, they were able to hold him out of the end zone. Didn't allow him to gash them for a ton of yards. Top receiver for the Seahawks was actually Cooper Kupp with 6 receptions, 61 yards. And then A.J. Barner had some good contribution for the Seahawks in receiving 4 receptions, 54 yards, and a touchdown. The only receiving touchdown for the Seahawks, and the only offensive touchdown, as a matter of fact, for the Seahawks. And a lot of credit goes to that defense for the Seahawks. Ended up with 6 sacks on Drake Maye, and that was a huge part of the game. Is Drake Maye was under duress the entire night. Pretty tough ask for a really young quarterback, 3rd youngest quarterback to ever make the Super Bowl. And as I had mentioned pre Super Bowl, I expected this to be a pretty tough test for such a young quarterback. To Drake Maye's credit, again, you can't take away from him. He was the MVP runner-up for the regular season this year, and deservedly so. Put up great numbers during the regular season, but in the playoffs, every single game, all 4 of the Patriots games, he was sacked at least 5 times, and tonight in the Super Bowl, sacked 6 times for a loss of 43 yards total there. So that's huge. The Patriots were able to get to Sam Darnold a decent bit and pressure him a lot, but only took 1 sack for 8 yards, lost on that one for the Seahawks. But yeah, for the Seahawks, you had two sacks for Derek Hall, 2 sacks for Byron Murphy Jr., and then a sack for Riley Mills, and the final one for Devin Witherspoon. So, and then the defensive touchdown was by Nwosu for the Seahawks on that strip sack fumble. And then, yeah, on the other side for Drake Maye, his final stat line ends up being 27 of 43 passing attempts, 295 yards, so a lot of air yardage, and then 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. But again, very tough ask for Drake Maye coming into this game. The offensive line for the Patriots did not hold up. It was a tough task against a really good defense, don't get me wrong, but one of the biggest concerns coming into this game for the Patriots was the left side of the offensive line, which has struggled partially due to Will Campbell, the left tackle, and then their left guard as well. They've had some issues on that left side of the offensive line pretty much all year, and especially in this playoffs, and that ended up being a huge part of the game tonight. Again, Drake Maye under duress pretty much all night, and not only that, but the Patriots have just not been able to get the running game going this year, really at all, especially in this playoffs. And that ended up being the case tonight. And that's a tough ask on a very young quarterback when your running game isn't getting anything going, and then your offensive line can't even hold up in pass protection as well. Pretty tough ask for Drake Maye. As a matter of fact, he also ended up being the leading rusher for the Patriots, ended up having 5 carries for 37 yards. The next closest to him in rushing for the Patriots was Ramondre Stevenson with 7 carries and 23 yards. So, asking a lot of Drake Maye, very young quarterback, only 23, starting in his second season, first Super Bowl. So again, a lot of credit to Drake Maye for what he's put together this year, and to the Patriots as well. But, the other thing that unfortunately they're not going to be able to shake now, it's going to be part of, the debate and the discussion around this team. It's cemented now, is that coming into this game, I had mentioned it, and, if you watched sports talk around the league from anywhere else, this was a common criticism of the Patriots coming into this playoffs and into the Super Bowl, is that they had a very weak schedule and strength of victory coming into the Super Bowl, which, again, strength of schedule, strength of victory, it's not everything, but it's one of those things to me where it's not everything, but it's something. With how weak their strength of schedule was, it was pretty hard to ignore coming into this game. It's part of why they were underdogs of 4.5, and obviously that was more than fair. They ended up losing by 16 points. So, again, a lot of credit. Both of these two teams were not expected to be in the Super Bowl at all. Both of these two teams weren't even in the playoffs last year. So both of these two teams, you could argue, maybe ahead of schedule. Certainly from what you would have expected. Both teams ended with a record of 14-3 coming into the playoffs. Both get to the Super Bowl. Again, I think, if I remember right, I think the Seahawks were like 50-1 to make the playoffs, and then the Patriots odds before the season started was like 60-1. So, and if you had bet this specific matchup, like if you had taken a futures bet on the Super Bowl is going to be Seahawks, Patriots, I can't remember, but in the last week or so, the number I had heard was that you would have made off of it was like 4,000 to 1, or I don't know. It was insane, the amount of money you would have made if you had somehow come to the decision of making the bet that this was going to be the matchup. But so again, a lot of credit to both these teams for getting to the Super Bowl, obviously, but for the Seahawks, they walk out with the win, get to celebrate. For the Patriots, a lot more of a bittersweet experience for you as a fandom. Now, a lot of other fan bases probably not going to have too much sympathy for you. Both of these two franchises have been in the Super Bowl a handful of times in the last decade or so, especially the Patriots. So hard to feel too bad for you. But specifically for this team, though, for Mike Vrabel, Drake Maye, again, I wouldn't be too concerned for them. They're ahead of schedule. They're in the first year. This was the first season for them under Mike Vrabel. I think he's a really good head coach. He's obviously brought, reawakened a good winning culture for the Patriots, defensive culture that they had kind of lost the last half decade or so. In his first year there as the head coach, got them to 14 wins in the season. Was a weaker schedule, but still winning as many games as they did, and especially getting to the Super Bowl, not an easy ask at all. To do that, and with a second-year quarterback who has looked pretty darn good in his, certainly this season, in his sophomore season in the NFL. So, they've got a lot of potential. If you can, you're going to have this offseason drafting. Of course, you're not going to be in great draft position, but, still ahead of schedule. Not the worst cap space as well. So this is a team that's ahead of schedule. If you focus on building up, offensive line, maybe some more, Patriots can build up their roster. This is a young team for the most part for the Patriots, so they'll have room to grow and possibly try to get back here again. But even getting to the Super Bowl, not a guarantee year to year, obviously, as we can tell, being that both the Chiefs and Eagles from last year, neither even made it to the conference championships. So, and many had one or two of those teams making it pretty far again as far as predictions. So, this is why we love the NFL. The unexpected happens. Sometimes there's not enough parity. Obviously, we had this same Super Bowl matchup only about a decade ago, back in 2015. So, a lot of people would have loved to have seen a different matchup that we hadn't seen before in the Super Bowl. But nonetheless, though, at least in my opinion, I'm happy with what we got here. And then back over to the Seahawks side, congrats to the Seahawks on winning that. It was a good showing for the Seahawks. They proved that, hey, we had the tougher schedule. As a matter of fact, the Seahawks had one of the toughest schedules in the league this year. And they beat some really good teams. Again, really the games they struggled the most in were the games against the Rams. So, top offense and a division rival. So, ton of credit to the Seahawks. They proved that they were for real this year. And for Sam Darnold, pretty much silence any remaining doubts on, is he a legit franchise quarterback. He is a good redemption story within the NFL, and he definitely deserves to be the franchise quarterback of the Seahawks. And if he continues to play decently well, he'll be the Seahawks starting quarterback for the foreseeable future. He's still a pretty young quarterback, so he's just he's in his prime now, so. If things go well for the Seahawks, they can keep him for a while now. But of course, the Seahawks' strength of that team really is that defense under Mike Macdonald. So, really young head coach there. One of the many young head coaches that excelled this year, which is very exciting. How good the young coaching is in this league, and the potential that gives us for future years. But yeah, so congrats to the Seahawks. The 2025 season is over. I can't believe it. We're now going to be fully into the offseason. Before I wrap up this video, though, did want to highlight just a couple of my bets that I had mentioned before, maybe some that I had failed to mention. But a lot of my bets ended up hitting. It was pretty satisfying. Part of why I, of course, enjoyed the game so much. Just running through a couple, I had under 7.5 for the first quarter. That hit. We only had 3 points for the Seahawks in that quarter. Again, I had also taken the Seahawks minus 2.5. That was my biggest bet on the spread. That hit. I had one interception at least for both quarterbacks. Of course, Sam Darnold threw none, so I lost that one, but the Drake Maye one did hit, which was good. I had also one of the more unique bets. I don't even remember if I mentioned this in any of my videos, but one of the special prop bets that was available for the Super Bowl was, will the winner of the coin toss win the game? Now, the research I had done on this was that in recent years, the team that has won the coin toss in the Super Bowl has quite often actually been the team to lose. And the reason for that is that generally in football, the team that wins the coin toss, the common choice is to defer, having your opponent take the ball first, and then you get the ball coming out of the second half. A lot of teams want that strategically. But interestingly enough, in recent Super Bowl history specifically, the team that's won has quite often been the team that scored first. So the reason I bet, so for this bet, the team that wins the coin toss will win the game. I bet no on that one because I bet that whichever team won the coin toss, they were going to lose. Sure enough, the Patriots won the coin toss. They elected to defer. Seahawks won the coin toss. Seahawks end up getting the ball first. They score first on that field goal, and then sure enough, the Seahawks went on to win. Again, it was just a trend. It was still, that's one of those fun ones. I wouldn't bet on that a ton. That one's just a special one for the Super Bowl. But, bit of an interesting discussion there maybe strategically for whether or not you want to elect to kick or receive at the beginning of a game. Because again, the conventional wisdom usually at all levels of football is to kick at the start of the game. So, and take the ball in the second half. So, pretty interesting being that especially at least in the Super Bowl in recent years, that has actually backfired on teams that have won the coin toss. Some other interesting bets that I had, of course, the biggest one, and this was actually the biggest bet that I had on the Super Bowl, funny enough, was will the announcers say the word schedule? And that bet did end up hitting. Mike Tirico and Chris Collinsworth, they made me sweat it out a little longer than I wanted to. They didn't end up saying it until the fourth quarter, but they did finally in the fourth quarter make mention of the schedule strength for the teams, and that triggered that bet for me. So that was satisfying to have there at the end. I had also mentioned Patriots first drive punt. That one hit. I also had taken a prop bet on either team to score a defensive or special teams touchdown. That one worked with the Seahawks getting the strip sack fumble, getting the pick six. And then National Anthem. I had bet the under on 19.5. Charlie Puth sang it. I don't know what the official time ended up coming out as, but at least by I had a stopwatch out. By my calculation, the National Anthem went for about 1 minute and 34 seconds, I believe. So, was pretty safe on that bet. That ended up being pretty close to the average historically for national anthems in the Super Bowl. Bit short for the most recent 5 Super Bowls, but I expected it to regress a little bit more towards the mean. And sure enough, that one hit. So that one was another one that was fun to have hit there. Again, as mentioned before, I hit on the under of 45.5. I also had the bet on over 5.5 sacks. That one hit. And that pretty much wraps up my bets for the game. I had also taken a few small bets on MVP. One of those I had taken was on Kenneth Walker Jr. Also for the Gatorade color, if you had a bet on that one, it ended up being yellow, green, lime, whatever you want to call it. That ended up being the Gatorade color for the night. So that one was the one that had the highest odds. So not too much of a surprise there. That one's been a pretty common one in recent Super Bowls. So, but yeah, that'll wrap up my instant reaction to the Super Bowl. If you've enjoyed and you've made it this far, please hit subscribe. I'll be here covering off-season news. It's going to come quick. There's already, of course, plenty of coaching hires and things that have happened during this playoff season that I haven't covered much just because I've wanted to focus on the playoffs. Now that we are fully in the offseason, I will get into the mode of covering what teams are doing with the coaches that already have been hired. And there are some that are probably going to be announced in the next couple days. Expect the Raiders to make an announcement probably Monday, if not Tuesday, as to who their next head coach is, which if you don't know who that is, it's most likely 99% chance the Raiders should be announcing that they're hiring Clint Kubiak as their next head coach, who, if you don't know who that is, offensive coordinator for the Seahawks. So obviously Seahawks had a good night. They've had a good season. Raiders will be, it's been reported that it was pretty much a done deal. Obviously just waiting for the Super Bowl to end to finalize that deal with him. So chances are the Raiders will hire Clint Kubiak as their head coach. That will basically wrap up most of the coaching carousel, outside of what the Seahawks will need to do to replace him. If the Patriots make any coaching staff changes, I don't expect much to change there. Obviously, nothing head coaching wise for these two teams. I doubt either changes their coordinators all too much outside of offensive coordinator for the Seahawks. So, yeah, we're going to be getting right into the offseason. Coaching changes, and not far out. We'll have free agency in about a month here, and then after that it's a month wait, and then we got the draft, and then off-season workouts and that kind of stuff for the NFL. So it does go quick. It's a bit slow as a fan. It does drag on at times, but I'll be here covering stuff. May go back to some more fun tier list videos and other fun stuff. So again, if you've watched this far, I do appreciate you a lot. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video.